listening to On the Couch with Carly. Carly's Couch is a safe space to talk. I'm a psychologist, but I'm not your pipe-smoking, tweed-wearing stereotype.
Uh, mm, mm, well, mm, 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 mm. Well, Carly, first of all, thanks so much for having me with you this morning. And so InVenture actually came to life about maybe 4.5 years ago now. And prior to that, it was probably circling around, but just had no grounding and no name. And was more just in the ether, I would say. But it really has come very simply from my healing journey from chronic illness. I've struggled with illness for various phases of my life. What is the invitation to go on an inner adventure? And this was really where InVenture has come from, is that a friend of mine asked me, what 2 words would you use to describe your life? And I said, adventure and freedom. And when illness comes and takes you down that particular road, the only invitation at that point is to go on an inner adventure. And that's really where it has morphed from and come from. And so the work takes various shapes and forms, and of course is informed by my professional background, but in many ways, and probably more so, by my own journey of getting well. And so much of, I guess, where illness comes from, even though it's multifaceted, is a lot of what we need to work on that sits here. So that's really in essence where it's come from. Mm, So I think it involves obviously a multi-pronged aspect to it. So I think there's obviously a talk component to it. There's a processing, aspect around language and words and meaning and understanding. But I think for me personally, it's been more of an embodied experience and process. And that's been a huge shift because I think I've lived my life very much in the head. I think a lot of us do, and not so much in the physical body. I've been able to shut that off and cut it off from the neck and override sensation, override feeling, override, what's coming up for me. I can do that very, very quickly. And I think InVenture has taught me, and I think continued to teach me, that you've got to go into the body. You've got to go look here and sense and feel and deeply feel your emotions and let that happen and move through physically. So language, talking, processing, yes, embodiment and getting into my body. breathwork has been an absolute game changer around my health and my continued healing. So developing my relationship with my breath. And then I'd say the last 2 years around creativity, which I've struggled with by myself. And I think, tapping into that and learning, actually, I might not be creative, but we all are. And how have I learned to work with that with myself as well as with clients? And then I guess guided by the natural world would probably be the most important one.
Mm. 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 Ah.
Mm.
Mm. Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the natural world element, I do feel just generally that I personally feel better when I spend prolonged periods in nature. I feel that my body feels differently. I feel emotionally, I feel differently. And there's such a wisdom that is held there that I start to notice. I pay attention differently. And I mean, I love the Karoo. I love the Karoo and the experiences we hold are out in the Karoo. And that's an example of how when you walk through that landscape, it's not a walk in the park. I often say to people, it's quite challenging. It's a harsh landscape. It requires deep, deep, deep presence when we are there. And I think that it brings us a lot closer to what we have moved so far away from in ourselves, of being on screens and devices and away from properly noticing the detail and the intricacy and the beauty of things around us. I think we've forgotten that. So to breathe with someone in the natural world is probably one of my favorite things to do, because I think it's combining, as you were saying, a deep presence as well as that release. And I think it just closes the gap where we have come to a place where we become so separate. So the natural world plays a significant role, whether it's here where I see clients and we breathe in the garden or sit in the garden or we go for a walk. I think that does a huge amount for our mental, emotional, and physical health. Definitely. Mm.
Mm.
I'd call them more just an experience, if I'm honest. Yeah, it's an adventure experience.
Mm. 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 Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
I think people who have, in some ways, who just need a space. And I know that sounds quite simple, but you just need a space to breathe, to tap out of the intensity of the world in which we live. And for 5 days, go completely offline, off the grid, and not be bound by notifications, responsibility, demand, needing to be with anyone or in a particular way. There's a freedom of coming on an adventure on your own that allows for you to drop all personas. There's no one that you have to take care of, think about, look after. I put watches and phones and any monitoring device into a box. And so there's no concept of time. And for those 4 nights and 5 days. It's a pure immersion into, I do call it a sensory expedition because it's going into, and your senses start to come alive when we remove ourselves from any distraction and from the noise, and we start to hear a different hum of what is sitting just below the surface within us, but we don't give space for, you know? And so the whole experience is created and curated based on the 8 people who come. So it's a small, intimate group. It's out in the wild along the Ghats River. So it's everything is taken care of for you. All you have to do is arrive. And, you know, Carly, I specifically give very limited information. So I definitely don't give an outline. I don't say this is what you're getting. Because I think people are wanting a little bit of adventure these days. I think we're wanting a bit of mystery. I think we're wanting a bit of excitement. And so when we can meet and talk about what you need, but then you just arrive and everything is taken care of for you over those days, and you don't know what's going to happen every day, it brings us into a deep sense of presence. And so especially people, to go back to your question, people in a time of transition, I think benefit. So whether that's perimenopause, menopause, you know, major times of transition for women where, yeah, feel like we're possibly losing it. And I think InVenture is very helpful for women in that space, for leaders who are possibly needing to shift, either leave an organization or have just needing to change roles. So a lot of people who are just stuck in that hyper adrenalized state and way of being in the world, I think benefit significantly from this experience.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It is sad. It is sad, right? Because we've, we just don't give ourselves permission to do it. And I also think the space, so many of the challenges, I mean, I'm sure with your clients as well, like what you will see, so much of it for me actually comes from people's inability to create space for themselves, like space to just pause, to think, to listen to our intuition, to know that how we need to move through the world often comes from a place of just being quiet for a moment and sitting with ourselves. And a lot of people, I mean, I've had someone say to me directly, I won't come on InVenture because I know that this quietness and the space and the lack of distraction will make me think about things I don't want to think about, and I'm just not willing to go there.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I would often say to people, you know, what if we could explore ourselves or our situation or our lives or whatever the case may be without needing to feel the pressure to make a decision based on what we discover. So what if you could just explore? What if you could be a adventurer or an inventurer? Because that is, I think, in many ways how we are naturally wired and made, is to be seekers and explorers. And what if you could just do that? And I think when people are, have maybe worked with me for a while or have sat and had a conversation, I think they feel more inclined to know that, as you say, when we're out there, it's not a forced process. And that's why I call it an experience, because the experience of the land will take you as far as you can go, as far as your body has capacity to hold that with myself and who we have out there and with the land. I don't think it's more than what people can hold.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Sure. Where do we begin? Hey? Yeah. Where do we begin with the men? Like two women talking about men. That's always just an interesting, you know, thought in and of itself. But yeah, so, the work with men is quite interesting. And I think in many ways, some of my insights around it is that, you know, it's very hard for men to, in some ways, like step into this space as we spoke about. It's very hard to sometimes like have the entry point to it. Even if they're struggling with something, they don't want to go and see a therapist. So I'm not a therapist. So, they wouldn't come to me for that anyway, but they might struggle with that because they don't want to see that maybe something is wrong, or, they struggle in the vulnerability of that. And I think again, they might not, say yes to anything that puts them out of control, or in a space that feels quite uncertain. And especially with a woman, it's one thing to go and see a man. And I think there's a lot of amazing work happening in the kind of men's group space that has been held by a masculine energy and by a man. But I think there's something very valuable about having a woman hold space for men and finding the comfort in that, both for myself, which has been a journey, as well as for those who come. And I think, I do see a lot of men. So I have a lot of like one-on-one men clients, as you say, mostly from a leadership point of view. And what I've started to notice and realize is that there's just such a deep seated sense of loneliness and isolation that is currently taking place. And this need to show up in quite a, like masculine, strong, robust, quite forceful way. And when they arrive and you can just note that, sense it reflected back to them. And then over time, bring in that softer connection and space for them. I think something starts to really shift. And I don't think it's overnight. I think that it takes time, because I think the trust between having a woman work with them needs time and space. But amazing stuff has happened, especially if I look in the Karoo experiences, right? Is that women will say yes to coming on the experience with a greater ease, much more ease. To full a men's InVenture, I have not done yet. It has not happened. But the guys who do come often return. So I've had, 3 or 4 guys actually come back year on year and have the experience. And I've asked myself, why is this the case? So if men are battling in this environment to take that first step,
why are they coming back? You know, I haven't had any women come back yet, but the men do. And I think that there's something about being with other men, but having it held by a female, I think can possibly be quite a interesting dynamic. And I think that, you know, being out in the Karoo, in the natural world, you are supported by other men. The experiences are geared that we do out there allow for an unearthing or an opening, right? And then the conversations between men are much deeper and fuller. And they go to an emotional place that they wouldn't necessarily go as a collective being held by a woman. And I think that's the difference. So if a man is holding the space for a group, I think they can have very deep conversations around things that are challenging for men. In the context of InVenture, what I've realized is that if I can create the space for them to go through experiences that unearth, I think what ends up happening is that they have different conversations with each other. For example, while we're walking or, you know, sitting by the river or around the fire, the depth that comes from that, I think, is very profound. Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 We'll repeat. Yeah. Like literally that, like linear. Yeah. 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 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree with you. And I think that's such a key insight that you've mentioned because yeah, I mean, they will with greater ease go on like spend X amount of money on a 5-day, 4-day mountain bike race and head out and do it, which is amazing for just being with community and exercise and connection. And I absolutely agree. I think it's like the late adoption of saying, hey, this is something that I can go and do for 5 days offline. It's not like too weird. I'm not feeling overly uncomfortable. It doesn't have that stigma possibly. And I actually felt better doing it. And exactly like you say, I think the formula is just, yeah, now I actually want to do it year on year. So men are the ones who will say to me, Jules, I want to come every year because I actually just need the space to be with myself, to think about my work, my wife, my family, my kids, my faith, my whatever. And, and I think to do that with other men in a non-forced environment. So like I don't force people to share with each other in a collective space. I don't force that. In some contexts, yes, but not when we're out in the Karoo. And to your point, yeah, I think for us as women, we might struggle possibly to give ourselves permission to do those sorts of things less so than what a man would. And it's an interesting one, but I think you're right around it worked for me. Something is happening for me. I want to go again. It's probably as simple as that. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And also as a return to, I mean, one of the principles of InVenture is a return to simplicity, is that it's going back to just what is so innate. I mean, I don't think it's overly novel or new or anything, that is not practiced in the world and is not done. I think, you know, just bringing people back to what is most simple. And when they remember that and when they get into their body with the breath or into they swim in the river or they lie on like a hot, I know this sounds ridiculous, but like they lie on just like a hot rock and you can feel like your back and your vertebrae and your skin and you can just feel it. There's something I think that happens for people, which I just don't understand. Like I can't verbalize it, but I feel it because I'm a deep feeler. So when I feel that I'm like, yeah, this is totally working for me, but I can't tell you all the science behind it and things. But I think when we just go back to what is most simple and you just give people permission to feel that, to remember that, to come into their body with that and just breathe, I think makes a huge difference. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it does. It has like a sensory activation, right? It is, and I think that is what is so beautiful about it is that, when you see people's joy of just smiling and lying there and enjoying it or really actually tasting coffee, let's say when you're out there, like we smash a coffee in the morning and off we go to the day and we move through things and then people are out there and they'll say, yeah, I can't remember the last time I tasted like what lamb actually tasted like, or to smell, coffee, or to feel to sense and to smell the rain or the Karoo bossies, or just sense that. And I think when that starts to wake up, I think something beautiful happens for people. And I think it gives us perspective. So that when, as you say, around the senses, I think they offer perspective. When we can tap into them, something happens for us as human beings. And when we lie under the stars, or we watch the moon rise over the ridge, or whatever the case may be, I think things start to change for us. And that's why I think the power of the natural world in mental and emotional health and reconnecting us, I don't think there's anything that offers the gentleness of that and very tactile, visceral experience of being alive. Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. No, but I get you. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of cows. Yeah. 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 Carly, have you spent much time in the Karoo? Yeah. Okay. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And the rock and the terrain. I mean, I think the terrain often mirrors a lot of what we hold internally. You know, I think there is an incredible mirroring that happens between, yeah, what we are sitting with, what's going on for us, what's happening with our story, what we're holding. I think the Karoo, the unearthly nature of the Karoo for us as human beings has a very tangible, visceral impact, you know, and I think the weather in that environment as well it's obviously extreme. It has its own microclimate, you know, so you never really know what you're going to get in that environment. But the weather plays such a critical role, I think, in creating a space where people can go and do some real deep exploration within themselves. Because it is like, I often get a bit scared in the Karoo, if I'm really honest, you know, when that wind comes up and you just feel that intensity of energy. It's a very humbling experience, but I think it is it's like daunting. Like, almost like a fear element to it. But I think it is incredibly powerful to be in that space. And when we can actually hold the intensity of the weather in the Karoo, I think that it expands our capacity to hold what we as human beings hold. And I think it gives us it opens that a lot, a lot. It's crazy, but I really do think that that is a key aspect of having an experience like this in that landscape is the weather, without a doubt. Mm. 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 I think I think the one thing is the first one for me is just a profound sense of disconnection. A profound sense of disconnection from ourselves, I think from our partners, from our work in many ways. I think so that's the first one is disconnection. I think the second one is that there is a deep seated level of distraction that is keeping us quite protected. And I think we are creating more and more of it in our day to day to perpetuate that separation and isolation. I think that we are not in spaces that allow us to feel. I think that people are just not feeling, and it's not being necessarily witnessed by someone that allows it to be moved through. So I think that people are holding a significant amount, and I think we don't have to look very far. If we look at the intensity of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, just by being human, just by being a breathing human, by living in the country we live in, and then we don't have to look very far into the world to know that there's a lot of chaos and heartache there. And I think that people are in many ways like shutting down. So yes, some people do reach out for help and connection, and I know I need it. I think a lot of people are just going deeper and deeper into themselves and not reaching. And I think that is perpetuating our loneliness. I think that is perpetuating our deep sense of having forgotten how to be with each other. Have truly forgotten how to be with each other in a meaningful way, so yeah, like communities. I mean, it's amazing to see online. I mean, you've probably seen it as well, about how many different communities are coming to life in different ways, shapes and forms, not being on technology, like real human connection. And I think that's amazing, because I think we've in some ways lost the essence of what community means. And one of the patterns I see with a lot of people in my sessions, or when we're out in the Karoo, is the one question I would say I get the most is, how, Jules, do I make friends as an adult? Like, how do I meet people? How do I make friends? And I'm talking like people who, are like pretty successful, have a great family, but are craving a point of, I guess, being witnessed by others, like friends, like people who can walk with us. And this is where I come back to the point around simplicity, going back to what makes us human. I think is what I'm noticing is probably the biggest pattern on the other side of it. Mm. Yeah, the loneliness, I think, is a major factor. Yeah, yeah. Mm, mm, mm. No, no. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Mm. Oh, yes. Yeah, I watched that. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. Oof, it's dangerous. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of wisdom and insight in that, because I would absolutely agree. Because because it comes down to exactly what you said around, if I can control something, and if I'm powerful and I've got influence and I can't be challenged, in quotation, um, you can make some very, yeah, dangerous decisions that have an impact that is far reaching. And I do think that there is something about, and I was having a conversation with someone the other day where they said, how do you bring in, again, that masculine and feminine together? So the softness and the nurturing aspects that we hold, as well as with, what the men hold. How do I think when we are together, it infuses in each other in a beautiful way, in the particular right context. And so, I often think that, she's right, what she says about just having this space, if it's not tapped into or held or brought to light or had conversations around, what is the destruction that can come from it? And one of the guys I was chatting to on her point was saying men don't have mentors. Like if you think about society, men don't have mentors, the father issue, the maybe brothers, maybe, role models or people that you can look up to. So where do you go? Where do you go for counsel, for advice, for nurturing, to be held in that context as well, which could prevent a lot of the loneliness from manifesting outwardly in quite a toxic way?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Totally. Mm. Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. 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 No, colleague. No, thank you. Yeah. Mm. 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 So the best way is probably just my website, which is just theinventure.com. So yeah, theinventure.com is where everything is. And if someone is keen to join us next year on an experience in the Karoo, that our dates will be uploaded for next year, probably in the next couple of weeks. And then on Instagram at the InVenture or at the InVenturist. And that's really it. Yeah. All other details around communication and connection is on there. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Carly, thank you. Mm. Thank you. It is wonderful to be with you. And thank you so much. Yeah. Chat soon. Thanks, Abe. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to On the Couch with Carly. If something in this episode resonated with you or made you feel less alone, that means the world to me. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now in video format on YouTube. For exclusive content and resources, visit our website at onthecouchwithcarly.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a rating or review. It really does help others discover our safe space for authentic conversation. Until next time, please take good care of yourself. I can't wait to be back on the couch with you again.